So next topic of your syllabus here it is rodents and vectors. So let us discuss about vectors today. So vector means carriers. So they are actually organisms that does not cause any disease. They themselves are not causing any diseases among human beings. They are not the causative organisms for the diseases, but what they do is, so they spread infection by conveying pathogens from one host to another host. So the pathogenic organisms will be there in one host. So by biting the person who is suffering from malaria, the mosquito will suck the blood from the malaria patient, and the malarial parasites, so plasmodium vivax, so they will be sucked by the mosquito, and when that mosquito bites some other person who is normal, so that time it will transfer that organism causing malaria. So here the mosquito is acting as a vector carrying the pathogenic organisms from one host to other host. So this is known as a vector, means the organism which is acting as a carrier of pathogenic organisms from one host to other host. So that organism is known as a vector, carrier of pathogenic organism from one host to other host. Example here, mosquito acting as a vector carrying a organism which causes malaria from patient to normal person. So that we are going to discuss. Different types of vectors are there. We are going to discuss all of them here. So there are two kinds of vectors actually, biological vectors and mechanical vectors. So in biological vectors, what happens is there will be a cycle of, there will be a life cycle continues in the body of a vector. So like mosquito. So when it bites the patient having a malaria, so the organism enters into the body of mosquito, and the cycle of life cycle of that organism which causes malaria continues in the body of mosquito, and then that is transferred to another patient. That is known as biological vector. So here the vectors that transmit diseases, there will be a multiplication of that pathogen in the body of a that vector. So example here is malarial mosquito. So that Anopheles, female Anopheles mosquito. So that is an example. And mechanical vectors such as only the vector carries the organism, and it contaminates the food or water, and the person will eat that contaminated food and he starts getting infection. So there will not be any role from the vector. So the organism will not enter the body of the vector, and there will not be any life cycle in the vector. So just it sits on the dirt, and it carries the organisms on its legs or some body parts, and it sits onto the food items, and it will transfer the organism from one part to other part. So the pathogenic organism will not continue the life cycle in the body of the vector. That is known as mechanical vectors. So just they are sitting on one part, and they are transferring that organisms to other objects. So they are known as mechanical vectors. Example here they are house flies. House flies. So next let us discuss about the ways of vector-borne disease transmission. So there are three main ways of transmission of vector-borne diseases. One is mechanical disease transmission, second one is biological disease transmission, third one is transvariant or otherwise called as hereditary disease transmission. So in mechanical disease transmission, what happens here, it is a vector is no more just a carrier. Vector is a carrier. So the pathogens are transmitted from one organism to other organism without any change either on the number or form of a disease pathogen, just they are carried from one place to other place or one organism to other organism. So it example here is trachoma. So second category here it is biological disease transmission here. So certain developmental patterns they exist either in the vector or in the host or in both. So the mosquito will bite the malaria patient and the organism enters the mosquito body, and there will be a multiplication or some life cycle continues, and then that continues in the human body when it bites other person. So that is biological disease transmission. And then next is hereditary disease transmission, that is otherwise called as transvariant. So here what happens is the causative agent is transmitted to the immature stage, that is egg. So the causative agent, that is organism, gets transmitted to the immature stage, that is egg. So that egg will form the adult insect. So when this adult insect bites or gives eggs, so all they become vectors of carrier of that organism. So example here it is tick. It is a very good example for hereditary disease transmission. Means so immature stage, that is egg, gets infected and that gives birth to a offsprings, and they start transmitting the disease, that is called as hereditary disease transmission. So the vector, it is a organism that is capable of transmitting the organism, causative organism, from one organism to other organism, and it causes a diseases among vertebrate host, that is called as vector. So carrier or bearer it is called as. In parasitology, the vector is an organism or a vehicle that transmits the causative agent or a disease causing organism from reservoir to the host. So that is known as vector. So usually the vectors, they don't become ill from carrying their various viral, protozoan or nematode infections. So these vectors, mosquito or ticks or mites, so which are acting as a vectors, carriers of pathogenic organism from the reservoir to the host, they don't become ill by themselves. So they may suffer from some damage, but they don't suffer from the infections, they don't become ill. So that is about vectors. So let us discuss some of the examples of vectors here which cause diseases among human beings. So there is a table, you can go through that. Vectors are mentioned, and this is caused by pathogens which are carried by some of the vectors. They are given examples in this table. So let us see that mosquitoes, Anopheles mosquito, it causes malaria and lymphatic filariasis. Culex, a mosquito, Culex, it causes lymphatic filariasis, Japanese encephalitis, and other viral diseases. Aedes aegypti, it acts as a vector for yellow fever pathogen and dengue fever, dengue hemorrhagic fever, and other diseases of lymphatic filariasis. And then Mansonia, it causes lymphatic filariasis. So there are many vectors which act as a vectors for a pathogenic organisms causing some diseases among human beings. So house flies, domestic house flies, you all might have seen in your house. So they will not bite, but what they do is they sit on a dirt, and the organisms, pathogenic organisms, they sit on to their legs, and again these house flies they come and sit on the fruits or any eatables, and the organisms they are getting transferred to the food items. So when the people they eat the food contaminated from the pathogenic organisms, so they start getting some infections. So the houseflies also act as a vectors. The diseases which are caused due to the houseflies, domestic houseflies, they are diarrhea, cholera, tuberculosis even, and loose motions, and communicable diseases spread by flies. So these are all some of the group of diseases caused by houseflies, domestic houseflies. They act as a mechanical vectors. So next let us discuss another type of vectors. They are called as ticks. So ticks, they are the small parasitic creatures. They feed of the blood of animals and human beings also. So they are spreading diseases among human beings. So actually these don't fly, they don't even blow in the wind also. So they live in a tall grass. So they live in tall grass and they crawl up and they fall on to their hosts. So when they fall onto the host, they start sucking the blood and they cause some diseases such as Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and babesiosis and human granulocytic anaplasmosis. So you can control the tick vectors by removing the ticks clearly, promptly, and applying the pesticides and reducing the tick habitat. Actually, they grow in grass, so avoid the growth of grass around your residence and avoid getting infected from ticks. So next type of vectors, they are called as mites. They are the small parasitic animals which grow on the skin and body parts of the human beings, and they live as long as 1 to 2 months. So if they are outside the human person, means if they are on the body of a human being, they can survive for 1 to 2 months. So if they fall down from the body, they die within 48 to 72 hours. So these are the called as scabies mites. So they die if exposed to a temperature of 50 degrees centigrade for 10 minutes. So they cause diseases such as allergic asthma, eczema, conjunctivitis, hay fever. So you can avoid or you can control these infections caused by mites by keeping away the infected person, not coming in contact with infected person. So that is another vector called as mite. So next, let us discuss about lice. So it is a parasite which grows on the body of human beings. You can see that in head or pubic area or body. So there are different types of lice which infect the human beings. They are head louse, body louse, or pubic louse. There are three types. So they suck the blood from the infected person, and when they come in contact with other person, they transfer the infections. The diseases which are caused by lice, they are intense itching, pruritus, and rash caused by allergic reaction to body lice bites. So when the body lice bites the body, there will be allergic reaction and red bumps on the skin and thickened or darkened skin, usually near the waist or groin. If the lice have been there for a long period of time, there will be a dark discoloration of the skin around the pubic area. So next, let us discuss about fleas. They are a small biting, jumping insects. Actually, they also can carry the pathogenic organisms, act as a vectors. So they live in the fur of many different pet animals. So dog, cat. So inside their body hairs. So you find these fleas. So you need to keep them clean by giving hygienic care to the dog or a cat. If you make them clean, there will not be any fleas, so you may not be having any risk to get infections from fleas. So diseases which are caused by fleas, they are Rocky Mountain spotted fever, sharp needle like pain on a skin, and small pink spots on the body, and body aches and weakness. So fleas may cause some skin responses and skin infections. So you can control them by uh, keeping the pets clean, or you should keep them free from fleas, and you should eliminate the places where wild animals are living, And then take a personal precautions, keep yourself away from such animals which may have a fleas, and do not relocate animals, and eliminate all food sources which come in contact with fleas.